got one other group to thank that are in the room. I'd really like for us to put our hands together for the hotel staff here. Let's give them a big hand. Thank you. Hotel staff, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Our first plenary panel, Alex Albert, Vice President of Supply Chain and Procurement Exponential Fitness, will moderate the Sales and Operations Planning panel. So come on up, Alex, with your group.
Hello. Hello. Hello, my name is Alex Albert. I'm Vice President of Supply Chain and Procurement for a boutique fitness franchise brand named Exponential Fitness. We're the largest boutique fitness franchise organization in the world with over 3,000 locations globally. Our portfolio consists of 8 brands, including Club Pilates, Pure Barre, Rumble Boxing, Yoga 6, Stretch Lab, BFT, Cycle Bar, and Lindora. So it's a portfolio company overseeing all of the execution for those brands. I'm also an alum of the Marshall School of Business Global Supply Chain Program, and just grateful. What spot on? There you go. Grateful to have this opportunity to be here with this incredible group of people. I met so many great folks yesterday and last night, and just want to make a little call out real quick here. Let's go ahead and clap it up for cohort number 5. Let's do that real quick. There you go. It's the best cohort for sure. I don't know, are there any cohort 5ers in here? Okay, no, they're all good. Don't worry. Don't worry. So in my role at Exponential, I oversee end-to-end supply chain and procurement, working to deliver best service and customer experience to our franchisees and our end customers alike. I'm here because I am a sales and operations planning enthusiast, and I've watched S&OP transform the organizations that I work within to deliver service, revenue, and profitability. Before we jump into this amazing topic, what I'd like to do is I'd like to thank Nick Vias over here and Marvi and the entire global supply chain team who put this amazing event together. So let's clap it up for them. And I would also like to thank this panel of amazing people who I've got to know a little bit better and who have taken time out of their busy schedules to come and chat about this topic here today. So clap it up for these guys. So our panel will take the form of a fireside chat. It's going to be very conversational and super chill, as I would tell my children. And we'll leave some opening at the end for some Q&A. And, you know, as we're kind of talking through this sort of thing, you know, think of some questions if you don't mind and hit us up at the end. It'd be really cool. So today we're going to discuss the value of S&OP and how it integrates product, demand, supply, operations, and financial planning into one game plan for the business. S&OP is a platform of communication and decision-making, which enables organizations to optimize performance, drive sales, and improve profitability. The value of S&OP is tremendous. It's a strategic business planning framework that enables you to align supply and demand and enable new product introduction across the enterprise. The significance of S&OP lies in several key benefits that it provides to the organizations that deploy it, specifically improved forecast accuracy, enhanced customer service, optimized inventory levels, increased EBITDA, cross-functional collaboration, and ultimately driving top-line revenue growth. So I think about S&OP, I think about it as a comprehensive approach to decision-making, which contributes to the overall success and resilience of the organizations who engage and deploy it. This panel all believes in the value of S&OP, and the highest possible outcome of our time here today is to convert everybody in this room to fans and enthusiasts in regards to S&OP. So as we open up here, we are going to jump in, and I'd like to ask each of the panelists here to share a little bit about themselves. Number one, your name. Number two, your role. I would say number three is your scope of responsibilities. And number four, how does S&OP look within your business practice? So we'll go ahead and start here with Michael.
Hey, everybody. Hey, everybody. How's everyone doing? My name is Michael Su. I'm from Hyundai Glovis. So we're the logistic arm of Hyundai Motor Group. So you guys probably know like Hyundai and Kia, they're under the Hyundai Motor Group. And within those, there's a lot of subsidiary and affiliate companies. So we're one of those affiliates. So we're the logistics arm of Hyundai Motor Group. I'm located in Irvine. Some of the roles that I'm involved in is optimizing sales and vessel operations on the West Coast from Mexico, US, and Canada. So obviously, utilizing and optimizing our vessel space, which we call tonnage. So for import and export, other responsibilities are making sure we're in compliance with federal regulations on the shipping side. Also ensuring that we're meeting all of our customer contract obligations. We deal with all different types of car makers, OEMs. So any car you see on the street, most likely we're carrying it on our ro-ro vessels. Other responsibilities are new business development and new projects that we're embarking on. So those are my major roles. And why is S&OP important in our line of business? So for a lot of us, we're on the manufacturing side, product based, but I'm on the back end, so the shipping side. So I'm a service provider on the shipping side, right? So I think supply and demand match is very important because I'm dealing with vessels. Our vessels come in all sorts of sizes, big and small. Some can fit 5,000 cars, some might fit 2,000 cars. So depending on the demand out there, we have to make sure that the forecast matches what our customers requesting, and we provide the required service levels to our customers. So I think that's very important, making sure that internal communication is aligned as well as external communication with the end customer and what the market requires. That's why it's important.
It's awesome. Thank you for that. We'll go to Alex next.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Alexandria Collis, Senior Director of Operations at Princess Polly. Been with Princess Polly about 5.5 years prior to us launching our US operation here in Los Angeles. We are an Australian fashion brand for those that are not familiar with us. And my role at Princess Polly has been to oversee all of customer experience, DC and warehouse operations, and I led our strategic entry into brick and mortar retail stores. And our first store opened last year in September here in Los Angeles and in Westfield Century City. Go check it out if you haven't been. And we've announced 5 more stores this year alone. So very exciting times ahead here for the brand. And I'm super excited to be here today. I'm the only female on the panel. I think I need to call that out. So shout out to all the women in operation. So very excited to be here today. And yeah, at Princess Polly, obviously we're driven by fashion trends, right? And kind of that supply and demand, same thing. I have a framework and that framework is people first, and that those people need to be communicating internally and externally, as was mentioned, and then efficiencies, right? Operational efficiencies, ensuring that there are efficiencies across your systems, your tools, and your tech, and everything in between. And then lastly is kind of this idea of train, empower, and change. How are you empowering your teams, and how are you being a leader to make change happen in the business? So very excited. Thank you for having me.
Sure. Thanks, Alex. Awesome. We'll go to Chris here.
My name's Chris Allison, and I was actually in the second cohort of
nice.
this program. So been a longtime friend of these events. I work for Explorer Systems and Industry, and there I'm a principal. So there's just a few of us, and we consult mostly on supply chain digitization. We're currently working on a contract with a Canadian private equity firm. But prior to that, I worked for PepsiCo, and I worked for them for a long time. But some of the big highlights of that career is I led several transformative supply chain programs. Some of them in electrification, decarbonization, and the value chain digitization. And so I'm more on the technology automation side here, but those are the interest I have is working on automating business processes.
It's awesome. Thank you. Aaron.
Thanks, Alex. I didn't know you worked for Pepsi. I worked for Pepsi at one point too. Yeah, in a former life. So my name's Aaron Zellhart. I'm the Senior Vice President at Mattel for Global Planning and Supply Chain Strategy. So Barbie and Hot Wheels and all the brands that you're familiar with from a toy standpoint. I'm here because Alex asked me to be here, and he's been part of my career in terms of just accomplishing things and just really the thought process that we put into things. So thanks for the invitation. I appreciate it. It's a great event. And what is S&OP in my current organization? It's the best instance of S&OP that I've ever seen over my 30 years, of course, because I'm responsible for it. Now, I think S&OP can be important, but it can also be irrelevant. It really depends on the execution of the S&OP because it's a decision-making process. And if that process has discipline and rigor and has regular attendance and it's actually driving the decisions in your organization, it can be transformative. It can protect the bottom line. It can ensure your profitability. It's a very, very critical tool if you do it right. If you don't do it right, then it can just be an annoying thing that people have to go to where they look at charts after charts after charts and business partners who don't understand what you're talking about. So it can be transformative. And currently at Mattel, we do have an excellent S&OP process that has been built up over a long time. And I would say it's probably the best instance of S&OP that I've seen in the 30 years that I've been in supply chain.
That's great. That's great. Well, thank you, Aaron.
Yeah.
Well, the first kind of question is going to go to you. Sure. Thinking about your experience at Mattel and Vans and all these different world-class organizations that you've worked within, you kind of touched on it a little bit as it relates to why S&OP is important. Let's expand on that a little bit. As you're thinking about effectively running a business, right? So how does it kind of create that foundation, connecting the strategy to kind of the tactical operating and execution capabilities of the organization? And what are some of those things that you see within the companies you worked in that are, I don't want to call them best practices, but how does it help conserve cash and conserve resources and optimize what's going on?
Yeah, sure. And I'll just expand on what we were saying before, but my experiences has been in consumer goods companies, right? And so in consumer goods companies, balancing demand and supply is critical to just being an efficient operation. And if you're an efficient operation, you're a more profitable operation. And so your S&OP is that formal exchange between business partners about how you're going to match supply with demand. Right. And the better you are at that, then ultimately, the more profit you're going to make. And so you've got to look at the S&OP process from the very beginning. What's the input signal, right? So what is your forecast, and how do you go about doing your forecast, and how do you evaluate it? So what's your input signal? Then what's the reliability of your supply, right? So reliability of supply is probably the first thing that you have to do before you can start to optimize. Because if you're not reliable on supply, any change or any sort of optimization that you try to do, you're not necessarily going to know what that result is, right? So you got to cleanse your input signal in terms of demand. You got to make sure your supply is reliable, and then you can start to tweak and optimize. And I think the key thing is not for us as supply chain people to just really geek out on the math, which is fun, and I like to do. I like math. Like, it's good. But it's really to involve business partners in the process in a way that they're receptive to and that resonates with them, right? Because oftentimes, we like to talk about supply chain stuff, and it's not as interesting for all the other functions, right? They don't necessarily spend as much time thinking about, you know, variance and bias and those types of things. And so we're excited about it because it's important. But we have to have our language and the interactions with our stakeholders work in a way that they feel like they're part of the decision-making process and that the SNOP is important. They want to go there because they find information that's useful, that there's a record of all of the things. So if they need to go back and look at it and understand what's going on, and ultimately that's where you make decisions and everybody leaves that meeting and says, okay, here are the decisions that we made. These are the conclusions, these are the decisions, and then you do a good job of disseminating that information afterwards. But it's really a critical process, and it can be super important or it can be irrelevant. It's up to the people who are executing it, what happens.
For sure, for sure. So as we think about Hyundai, and you think about, you all being kind of the downstream receivers, Michael, of these outputs of an S&OP process. Why are forecasts so important, to you and to your space in ensuring supply and demand and enabling, those new products and new capabilities coming to market?
Forecast is definitely important for us. We see customers, OEMs, we see short-term forecasts, like maybe a month out, and then we see long-term forecasts. So usually when we have a contract with a customer, they present to us a long-term forecast for like 1 year or 2 years. We kind of plan our vessels because we're dealing with ro-ro vessels. So in our fleet, Glovis owns 30 or so owned vessels, asset-based. And then we long-term or short-term charter out to other carriers, our partners. So that fleet's another like 70. So in our entire fleet is around 100 vessels. So depending on these vessels, we service multiple regions and trade lanes. And that forecast is very important so that we can plan our vessels about a 1 month out, because we have vessels servicing like Europe lane, Mediterranean, and sometimes that vessel is, maybe they need a smaller vessel, then we can kind of exchange vessels and that vessel will come to our trade lane. So forecasting is very important. We understand that, for the most part, short-term forecasts, like if we're looking at August production, we think that production versus actual exportable, about 70–80% of produced will export the following month, because we got to consider quality holds, supply chain issues. So those type of things. So we take that into account, and so that we can better plan our vessels and for our customer, so that we can meet specific deadlines. Because we know cars, they have launch events, facelifts, need to arrive to market at certain times so that they can go to the car show. So there's all these different external factors that we need to meet. We understand that, and the more tightened information that we have close to, it better helps us to plan the appropriate size of vessel that's necessary for the customer, and also to optimize our profit loss, right? But we understand that a key word in our business, we feel like, is flexibility, because a lot of companies like, hey, if you can't bring this much volume, we can't load it. But we feel like as Glovis, we have a lot of flexibility to our customers, so that there's no rigidness. So I feel like, that's a very positive thing that we try to portray from our company. But bottom line, forecasts are very important, not just for us, but also for the customers, trucking and that back end rail. So all those things are all interconnected. So forecasting is definitely important for our side of the business.
It's awesome.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, and forecasting is important, right? It's hugely important. I think the thing that we often get tripped up on is we really focus on the math piece of it, right? So we focus on variance, we focus on, accuracy, we focus on bias, those types of things. And as supply chain people, we want to get more and more accurate, right? And that's, you should, right? That's definitely what you should do if you're in a demand planning function. The key, I think, to making it work within an S&OP process is the alignment piece, right? And so consensus demand planning, but getting everybody and all your stakeholders aligned to, this is the forecast that we're going after, not the pursuit of being right. And sometimes with supply chain, because there's a lot of math, we want to be right. And that's important, but it's really more important to make sure that everybody's aligned to that forecast. And what are the ramifications of that forecast? And what happens if you're above it? What happens if you're below it? So forecasting is hugely important, and you got to get the math right, but you have to go one step beyond that and really focus on the alignment piece, because that's when you start to become high performing. And you can always go back and tweak and, you know, make things better later on, but the alignment piece is really key to making the whole process work.
Definitely, please.
Take it back on the alignment. I think definitely communication is part of that, like with your relationship with your customer. Like for us is B2B directly to the OEM. So I think if there's a change, of course, we know nothing's perfect. Things could fall off or increase suddenly. Like as long as we have that communication channel with the customer, that's key, because with that specific timing, we can, that time bar, we can move and be proactive and make another decision and be like, hey, if your volume triples, we can find another vessel from a different trade lane, we'll bring it for you.
Mhm.
Because I think customer satisfaction is key for us. So I think communication is really important.
Kind of want to draft off of this a little bit, if that's okay. You know, you're talking about a lot about, you know, how to align supply and demand and communicate that information. Can anybody share a little bit about, you know, kind of what role technology plays in that as it relates to consensus-based demand planning, and then also, you know, that outward communication in terms of how you know, you're signaling those demand inputs out to your key providers and your key stakeholders.
Yep, I heard the word technology, so I think that's a very generous question. Thank you. But really getting consensus, like they said, alignment is essential, right? And supply chain leaders all in this group already know the power of that. So it's a question of how do you get that consensus? You may have, it may be even just the internal portions of your supply chain or external sub-suppliers or what have you. How do you do that? And in my opinion, that tool is becoming more and more a platform for technology. And that is a great enabler of consensus, because you can have a world-class manufacturing operation that does great production planning. You could have a great sales force, people that put the product on the shelves for you, and great sub-suppliers, but they tend to work in their own silos. They maximize the value for their function, and that can be internal as well. If they're internal, it's a little easier to get the trust to where you can get the transparency to figure out how to work together and identify the risks. So I think in any of these, I think job one is risk management, and what things can go wrong, especially at PepsiCo. You know, they have a perishable product that if it's not from the plant to the retailer within 2 or 3 days, then they stale out the product because they want to give. So there's not a whole lot of slack in that type of system. And so in order to get everyone pulling the same way, we have to work cross-functionally, and we identify the risks. But the power of all that is that in the end, we get the right product to the right place and on time. And so tools with to get all those inputs from all those functions. It's like sometimes drinking from a fire hose. Nowadays, it's just getting more and more data. So AI has been out there for a few years. It's getting better all the time. So that should help us, but we still need our functions, our people, to identify what those boundary conditions that these tools work within, and what are valid inputs, and is output valid as well. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. So, Alex, at Princess Polly, you know, obviously you oversee the CX space and communicating to customer, and you're, you know, taking inputs, and your internal teams are saying, hey, this might be on time, this might be late. You know, you have these hard deadlines and hard launch dates, and people want their fast fashion, including my daughter, by the way. You know, why is the language of business so important to obtaining buy-in to the S&OP process? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I love that I'm taking this after kind of everybody else, because It's all the forecasting, right? Understanding your supply and demand and the technology. And I would even argue to kind of piggyback on that a little bit with tech and tools, you might have a ton of different systems that you use, but how are they working together and how are they all speaking to each other? And what do those integrations look like? And who's owning those integrations? And how are you partnering with the technology partners of those SaaS companies? And are you meeting with them weekly? And are you connecting with the teams to align? That's part of this. And I think that's part of that, what creates really strong internal communication. I would argue that some of what we do, and because we're D2C, I think that we're talking a little bit about B2B. I have a different perspective as well with working directly with the customer. And I think it's so important that when you're pulling one lever in the business, that the rest of the business understands. And I'll give an example. If for us, one of our marketers decides, we want to run this promotion, there's something going on, we need to jump on it, we're going to run a promotion, we're going to do buy one, get one 50% off. Well, if you're not properly forecasted, and this is where that forecast comes into play, then at your DC, what's going to happen is you're going to get a exponential amount of orders dropping at one time, and then you're going to have to shift labor from either your returns or your inbound team to get everybody across outbound orders. Oftentimes this happens during peak for us, during Q4, which comes in, a lot of the contingency planning comes into play at that point in time. So that's where that sales and planning and operations together work cohesively, and why it's so important. Because let's say that does happen and then you don't have the labor, so then the customers are now impacted. And when the customers are now impacted, the marketing team that thought they were providing a great offer, we may now be paying for it literally, because it's going to cost us in labor, because we're going to have to work overtime. We're going to have our employees work that overtime. So then their orders get delayed, right? And so then the customers are reaching out to CX. So now there's another cost added to the actual operation. And when CX then reaches back out to, I always think it's so funny because in a lot of businesses, customer experience lives under marketing. And I always find that so backwards. It lives within Princess Polly, lives under operations. A marketer is not going to reach out to FedEx when you've got a customer with a Wizmo question, which is, where is my order? The dreaded question. Where is my order? And typically returns are the top reasons for customer inquiries in any apparel online business specifically. And so when, these customers are reaching out, and a marketing team is going to kind of go around the issue and just communicate. Sure, it's going to be great communication. It's going to be a great experience, but they're not going to attack the problem. So we've got back loops within our organization that the customer experience, whether it's CSAT results, which is customer satisfaction. Princess Polly has a world-class outstanding customer satisfaction score, I might add. And or your NPS score, your net promoter score, which is going to tell your business, how your customers are, how likely they are to recommend you. And if you're getting feedback on issues with shipping, well, then operations is going to go talk directly to the carriers, and maybe we're preventing a future issue for thousands of other customers. We're shipping tens of thousands of orders a day. So this is a lot of units dropping. So if marketing pulls one lever that says buy one, get one 50% off, that unit count is going to increase exponentially. And that's where the operation is going to be strained and cost money. So the internal communication, to kind of circle back, I always say customer experience is the heart of an organization, and we pump blood and deliver oxygen to vital organs in the business to help them thrive and grow stronger. And that is what we do. When we're getting feedback, it's being pushed to the merchandise team to say, hey, quality is an issue, or the operations team to say, hey, we need to figure this out with the carriers, or it's to the e-commerce team to say, hey, this communication on the site is confusing. All of these things matter when you're planning. All of these things should be taken into account in the financial forecast to better understand where you need to go and where you need to be every second of a customer's journey in order to create the outstanding, world-class, and award-winning, which we have, award-winning customer experiences.
That's awesome. So kind of drafting off that a little bit, can you kind of help us understand, like by extension to the customer, like what sort of platforms are you using? What's the communication methodology? You know, as you're talking about the example of, you know, unplanned sales promotion. Like I've had one of those too. We when I was at Stance, you know, we pulled the trigger watching a football game on a Sunday over Black Friday weekend, and we did, you know, we had almost 70,000 orders in our queue by Monday morning. And you know, it came in, I was like, what are we going to do? And you know, ultimately the customer is the one that's impacted. So, you know, Princess Polly, from your perspective, like what are those best practices in engaging with the customer, you know, kind of keeping that halo effect as it relates to you know, providing the best customer experience and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so I could sit here and list off our tech stack, which I'm not going to bore you with. But you know, I think finding the best possible partner that you can within a help desk system. There are so many out there. And I will actually do a plug for Gorgeous, which we use within our customer experience department. And you know, they plug in directly to we're a Shopify Plus, you know, business, and everything is feeding into the ticketing system to create efficiencies within the team. The same way you're planning labor in a DC, you're also planning labor in customer support and customer experiences to support different areas within customer experience, which whether it's the front end or back end of the site for e-commerce. And so when we're looking at evaluating systems, I'm looking at the relationships that we're able to build. We drive at Princess Polly a lot of businesses' product roadmaps because we're so invested and so involved in what I just mentioned was the partnership element of it, and really understanding and optimizing every single system. And then we have subject matter experts that run those systems specifically, that are having weekly meetings with the Gorgeous team. Obviously, then I kind of mentioned a little bit about on you know, returns being like one of the top reasons for customer inquiries. That's another really, really important key function that drives loyalty, that drives repeat purchases, and ultimately helps your overall customer experience. So a really, really solid return system for us. We use Loop Returns. I just said I'm not going to name our tech stack, but these are some really important key partners. And, you know, I think that when it comes to, again, working with the Loop Returns team to understand where we're at all points in time with the volumes and the way that we are taking customer inquiries and then actually actioning things within these systems to make it easier on the front end for the customer to go through their journey. And so when it comes to the overall customer experience and we're getting feedback on how well and how fast, because in customer experience, all that you're looking for, and specifically customer support, customer service side of things, you're really looking for efficiencies within your first response time rates, how fast you're getting back to customers, how quickly you're actually resolving their issue. So there's a lot of really amazing tools out there that can help support those efficiencies within CX.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. So we talked a lot about building consensus and having the appropriate decision-making platform. And as you can see, you know, holistically as operators and supply chain professionals, we're thinking about the customer. We're putting the customer first. You know, we want to deliver on time and in full. And it's all the planning, the strategic planning, all the stuff that happens upstream that plays out in real time downstream, right? As it relates to, you know, delivering that service to customers. So, you know, Chris, we talked a little bit about this, you know, kind of leading in here, but, you know, why is building consensus and having the appropriate, you know, decision-making platform, you know, important to the business? And, you know, kind of connecting the elements here, you know, we have Alex who, you know, is working on that front end piece. You know, she's kind of like the final execution component of. We have Aaron who's thinking strategically upstream and aligning supply and demand, and that's flowing into that execution path. You know, why is that building consensus and, you know, having that platform about how all that plays out really important?
Yeah, that's a good question too. So Yeah, the consensus is super important. I talked about risk management earlier. So that's one key thing, that you want all the risks to bubble up. You want to have a full risk management plan. So if you've got a consensus around what that plan is, then we can work on the risk management. But also, I think it's real important that we have a consensus across the full supply chain on what the KPIs are. And can we get visibility to that? And so, times are changing with that. I mean, maybe, well, I don't want to date myself too much, but when I first started, a lot of the plans and stuff came from up top, and they came down. You got a 5% increase of this, 10%. And what I've seen a big change, and I think it's for the better, is that now we find ways to get a consensus on what those plans should be. Then we find out that we're able to manage supply and the supply for the demand a lot better, get a better demand signal. And again, I think one of the best tools for this is where technology plays a great piece. That if I can find a platform that I can look at the KPIs that, in real time, ideally, then we can share the same information across. And that really cuts out a lot of the noise about those arguments about how well are we doing, or my plants are running, 105% to last year or whatever. It really, if we can find out what those KPIs are, what's important to the overall look, which means you have to look at this, and you had a great point about the system. You really have to look at it end to end. And without that view, and really, I talked the technology piece, but when I say systems, I mean the people systems. HR is super important. If you're automating stuff, maybe you're putting in some devices to give you real-time inventory. We're not sending people out there. So, HR, those change management piece has to be worked on. And so no matter how complex your platform is, I think it's a great idea to get a very good systems engineer that's very good at looking at all the people systems, evaluating, hey, these warehouse guys have been using this tool, they've had great success with it. Can we integrate that? Or if it's broken and it's not going to do any good to just automate a broken process, right? We want to get a process that works, so we need to redesign it. And so those are kind of the key questions that you can ask yourself when you are looking at what platform are you on, or what are you thinking of transforming to. I think those are very helpful things to get consensus, or collaboration is, I think, a better word, across the full supply chain.
Can I add a little something?
Yeah, for sure.
I was just gonna say, I think it's so interesting when it comes to how many people, because automation is so important, but also creates complexities, and you'd be so surprised at how many massive businesses are still working on spreadsheets, right? And a little bit living in the past, I would argue, in that sense, because of the way systems integrate now. But I would love to take a little survey of the audience and ask how many people use AI for what they do. If you have a phone, raise your hand. Okay, because it's everyone, and it's integrated into our lives in the ways that you don't even realize. And I think that's so important that as operators and within supply chain, or in business in general, that when you're considering things like, ChatGPT and asking it for help, and how you're doing business and running things and integrating systems, it's so important to think about it is the future, however it's going to look, right? I don't think it's going to be as integrated and controlling as people may think. There's still going to be people behind the scenes running it. But yeah, I think great point with when it comes to, the integrations in the tech stack overall, that's what ultimately drives efficiencies, but you have to understand it in order to avoid the complexities.
Yeah, I was just going to add on, and you were talking about KPIs and the alignment behind KPIs. And I think, when you look at KPIs, there's a ton, right? Like you can data and metrics, like you can pick a ton of different metrics. And I think it's really important, and you know this phrase, but clarity and brevity, right? So Alex and I talked about that a lot in previous work experiences, but with the amount of metrics that are available and the amount of data that you can throw at people, you've got to be really targeted and understand, okay, what's going to drive the business? And in your process, in your S&OP process, as you kind of go up through the escalations till you get to an executive level, you have to boil those down and you have to make sure that everybody understands them so they're clear. But you're also not going over metrics that might be cool and important to look at for supply chain folks. But as you go through the S&OP process, you continue to pick the most relevant ones. The stakeholders understand what you're measuring, right? Because a lot of times there's misunderstanding on what you're measuring. So you have to explain the metric, but a way that people resonates with them, and be as brief as you can with that metric review. So I think the alignment on KPIs is critical. Every business is set up different. Every supply chain is set up different. So the KPIs that have been important to me at different times may or may not still be those same things. So you've got to look at your business and say, okay, what are the most important KPIs? And that will change over time. And as it changes over time within your S&OP process, you can't introduce too much change too quickly because people will just get lost. So the alignment on KPIs, I think, is one of the key things for S&OP to work.
Yeah, let's dig into that a little bit. I think Peter Drucker said you cannot manage what you cannot measure, right? I think it's a maxim that I've used throughout my career and that sort of thing. And when you think about having the appropriate and distilled, and mutual understanding of those KPIs, I think fundamentally what we're trying to point to, as we measure the performance of an operation, a process, that sort of thing, is building trust, right? And if you're successful at building trust in the data, in the process, and kind of bottoms up, then I believe that is going to create better executive buy-in and more, confident executive buy-in to the process. So, maybe we can talk about that a little bit in terms of like, why is trust important, in the data, the information, the reliability of the forecast, and, how does that interplay with the C-suite, right? Getting those folks aligned on what we're doing. So, I'll take that to me. I'll start it off. I'll use a couple of different environments that I've worked in my career. The first one I worked with Aaron, and under Aaron's tutelage, was driving S&OP within the organization that I was in, and it was a really great experience. I would say there was moderate executive buy-in to start, and folks were excited about it, but it did cross over to somewhat of a metric readout in some places. And so, Aaron was really big around brevity and speaking the language of business and distilling things down in alignment, so we can really extrapolate that maximum value. And I would say, like, on a maturity scale of S&OP, and you can judge my output here, but maybe it's like a 5. Would you say 5, 6?
Sure, I'll give you 5 or 6.
5 or 6. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
On a scale of 1 to 10. Everybody good with that? 5 or 6? Okay, we'll go with that. And then I kind of balance that with I was VP of supply chain operations for a brand called Stance. And at Stance, when I started there was no S&OP process whatsoever. And one of the I would say greatest accomplishments was working with the team. We had a really great operations team that believed in the vision and understood, the value of it. And we also had a really interlinked manufacturing platform where, our suppliers we produced about 30 million units of product a year. And, aligning the execution of that across our platform, given how integrated our partners were, was quite complex. And so, we use like kind of these business problems and kind of spreading the word and evangelizing, to use a little bit of terminology there, the executive team, to kind of launch this ideation around like, how do we come together? How do we build consensus? A CEO might hear, hey, we're late from this person, or, we're going to miss service from this person. It's like, how do we kind of control those narratives and kind of put that into an environment where, the executive team are sitting in the cockpit and they're looking at all the controls. They can see that this one looks good, that one looks good, but this one's blinking red. We might have a problem there, right? And so what I found in my journey at Stance was, we started from nothing. And, when I left 4.5, 5 years later, we had implemented a full scale S&OP process, soup to nuts, top to bottom, that went all the way down, to a capacity confirmation within our factories, and then all the way back out, measuring, service to customers and that sort of thing, inventory, KPIs, that sort of thing. And, what I found was that the obviously executive buy-in is key, and getting those folks like aligned, but sometimes you have to do a little bit of convincing and a little bit of salesmanship. So that was my experience. Maybe you can kind of like chat a little bit about that. I don't know if anybody wants to take one of those.
Yeah, I'll take it to start with. Yeah, the red, yellow, green, the colors matter,
Yeah.
right? But metrics for me, in my experience, metrics are to solve problems. In the difficulty with an S&OP process, especially at the C-suite level, is that that's often misunderstood. And so if you don't, if you're presenting something that's not an all green scorecard, then it can be a problem, and people have anxiety about that, right? Even if the person that's looking at it or the person that's presenting it. But you've got to get to a point where you've educated the C-suite, where they understand, what the measurements are, and that an all green scorecard means your scorecard isn't very good, right? You're not optimizing your operation. You're not critically thinking about your operation and how to make it better. So anytime I see an all green scorecard, I'm like, well, we're not measuring anything here, right? We're just patting ourselves on the back. And you gotta try to not do that. And people definitely want to do that when they get to the C-suite and presenting it, in a boardroom and those types of things. They want to do that. They want to say, yep, with no problems, everything's good. But a really mature process, you'll be able to talk about what are those opportunities for us to improve, and how do we measure those? And, a scorecard having yellow is fine, right? And it should be there, because you're not going to continually be at the optimum performance. You always can get better.
Definitely. Awesome. Well, one question I wanted to kind of throw out there, as we're thinking about S&OP, we're thinking about integrated business planning, we're thinking about the future. We've talked about technology, AI got brought up, machine learning, that sort of thing. I just want to kind of go across the board here, or the panel here, I should say, and just ask, what do you think like the biggest impacts and trends are within S&OP as we look to the future? Like, obviously, we mentioned AI, we mentioned machine learning. We have these technology implements that are enhancing our ability to plan and align supply and demand. We have, multiple project management platforms, these days, that are all, digitized and agile, that will enable us to enable new product introduction and, understand where we are on that pathway to market. And, kind of building consensus. I don't want to use the word consensus, but kind of integrating those two together to ensure, you have evergreen, products and capabilities that, might have, a contour or a demand curve that might be a little bit more flat and stable. And then you have, new product introduction that, spikes those channels across the horizon. Like, as we're thinking about technology and AI, what role does that play within S&OP? Like, how are you all thinking about it internally within the companies you work with?
I can start.
Yeah.
So I would say that it's really important to stay curious, right? There's so much out there that it's also critically important to also stay simple and keep things simple. Sometimes you start, different and we're talking about buy-in from different stakeholders. Well, if different teams have implemented solutions and systems that are not speaking to the systems that are already existing, or, it can get so complex so fast. And then you got to work on creating efficiencies again, which we're always all trying to make things more efficient by relying on software, relying on the people to run that software, whatever it may be. But I would say, one of you asked what's one of the most critical things that we're paying attention to, and as a direct to consumer, primarily e-commerce brand, again, pushing into brick and mortar retail. So it's going to be a new environment for us specifically. So now it's going to come down to, well, we've got e-com sorted out, right? We know what we're doing from a planning perspective for e-commerce, but this is a whole new territory for us with Princess Polly. Obviously, we'll stay curious on the e-com side and really understand, like, there are so many different sales channels now. When you're a D2C brand and you have a website, or you're operating online to any capacity, there are so many sales channels. So we've introduced TikTok Shop, right? So for those that also don't know, Princess Polly's huge on social media. We were one of the first to TikTok prior to the pandemic. Our customers and influencers were doing TikTok hauls where we ship them product and they're doing all these try-ons. And now TikTok has the ability to shop directly from the platform. So there's so much more of a customer base that we maybe have not previously considered or planned for. There's, whether it's Instagram or Facebook, or we're huge on social media. So it's driving a lot of brand awareness at the end of the day, depending on wherever they purchase from, whether they do it online or on an app or in store. So for us at Princess Polly, those are some of the key things that we're really thinking about in order to ensure that there are efficiencies and that we're really creating an omni-channel experience, especially pushing into brick and mortar.
That's great. How about you, Michael?
For us, for the shipping side, I think we deal with all of our customers deal with there you go. For us, we deal with EDI, so that's automated data transfers. So again, it's before we're doing PDF, like master bill ladings. I'm sure you guys know it's a physical document, but now it's all automated EDI transmissions. So, but with that, it's automated and it's clear and concise. But again, efficiencies, I think, if the data is properly transferred. We do have track and tracing capabilities, but again, is it correct? Is it precise? Because customers will come back, hey, this is telling me it's here, but it's not here. And we go back to our system, double check. So sometimes it's inefficient, but I guess it's finding the level playing field, making sure that data is efficient. And then on the other side, operationally, automation is something that we're gearing towards, but the biggest thing is, as you guys know, in shipping, we have unions and stuff like that. So we're trying to automate vessel operations with like RFIs. So people, RFID. So not every person physically tagging and scanning each car, but maybe we'll have like an apparatus at the end of the ramp when the cars come off the vessel onto the ground. It automatically reads it and tells it where it's going, and it's arrived to the customer. But then again, that's another big issue with the longshoremen on the West Coast. So that is not implemented, and it's another big issue that I won't go into. But those are the type of things we're gearing towards. That we're trying to push towards that, but there's a lot of roadblocks because there is some red tape there. So
Inventory accuracy.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Chris, from your perspective, what's your thought on, the future, where we're headed?
Thank you for both very good points, but the complexity one is one that I see quite often. So whether things are getting more and more complex. And so luckily some of the tools are getting to where they're self-correcting and things like that can help. But that's only one part of the system. When we think about systems, especially when an engineer says it, you think technology, but you've got to realize the system is made up of more than just the technology. It's the people, it's the labor unions. And so you have to, putting in a platform is not a one and done. You have to keep revisiting it. And I mean on a frequent basis. You have you have to look at how your system is working day to day. Is it working for you? Is there something we need to transform or iterate on to make it better and operate better? And so I think that would be one of the things that no matter what platform or technology you put in, you have to look at the sustainability of that platform and how you're going to keep it going.
It's awesome. And AZ,
Yeah,
from your
sure.
perspective.
I think there's a couple things. One, I think in the preparation of all your S&OP materials, technology is going to expedite all of that, right? So 2 weeks to put a report together, that type of thing. It's all going to condense down. So look for those opportunities. And then again, I think it's alignment, right? You want all your stakeholders looking at the same data, same information, right? You don't want people coming to meetings like, I like my data, I don't like your data, so I'm going to stick with mine, right? Because it tells me what I want to say. So I think once you can, and the developments now with aggregators, right? So you can get system from disparate systems as long as you have good master data, right? And you go through a good master data process, you can take information from disparate systems and put it together in a communication platform that people could use. I think those are the real opportunities. One, it's going to truncate all the time that you need to prepare for these things. And then two, it's really going to allow that alignment of data, right? So you stop arguing about the data and you start thinking about how do we make decisions for the business? That I think is going to be the real change.
Yeah, that's great. Awesome. Well, it's been incredible time up here talking about this. So we're going to transition now. We got about 10 minutes left. Wanted to see if you all have any questions for any of the folks up here. So we will, you maybe raise your hand. We'll start in the back there. I like the haircut, the very back. Right? Yeah, you.
Unsayable and talking about the marketing operations interface. I mean, how many marketing executives are in this room right now? There's a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Good point.
absolutely. Yeah, thank you.
Clap that up.
What was your name? Drew. Thank you, Drew. Yeah, it's so interesting because to me, it's so obvious that because they're kind of up at the top of the funnel in a sense, right? You've kind of got product and marketing in one area. And when we talk about alignment across some of the key stakeholders and executives in the business, it's almost, it's so important. Somebody mentioned it about the education and when you have to take information, a lot of information, and try and teach somebody something about something they may not honestly care about, like in all reality, as much as we want them to care, you have to make it digestible. And especially for marketers, and we have a phenomenal marketing team, and it's the communication that we have implemented in order to help them understand really stemmed from the customer. It was really just giving the customer the voice, because that is one of the things the marketing team isn't going to think about, like, what's your UPH for the day for outbound? Like, they don't know they might not even know what that means. So how do you make them understand what that means? And that is through the CSAT score. When you say, hey, you drop this event, back to my earlier point, you drop this promotion. Now we've got X amount of orders coming in, and the CSAT score is now sitting, 5 basis points below what it was a week ago because we did this. So it's really helping them understand the greater picture and how it impacts the overall customer journey. So I think that was a great point. And yeah, thanks for highlighting that, because it is so true. And it's something that we've worked on really hard at Princess Polly. And I'm very proud of myself, our teams, and everybody that's had the ability to help educate people across the business.
That's great. Thank you for that question. All right, we got another one. Okay, we'll go right here in the back. There we go.
Models best you've seen in 30 years. Share, are there in the beginning you mentioned the Mattel models, the best you've seen in 30 years. Could you share, are there a handful of attributes that sort of differentiate it from others you've seen?
Yeah, I think the first thing that we did was we decoupled demand and supply, right? And a lot of organizations, they're still together, right? And so when you don't separate, you don't make a deliberate effort to separate demand and supply, you know, you have markets or you get commercial organizations that are ordering inventory. Well, you don't want them to order inventory, right? You want them to tell you what they can sell. And so a lot of times, because we're supply chain people and we execute, we have interactions with our stakeholders, and our stakeholders tell us how to execute. We need to airship this, or we need, you know, this inventory in the DC. When we shouldn't be asking, or we should be asking, tell me what your need is, and then we can come up with, you know, how to best execute that, because we have a whole bunch of other tools. So, you know, the first thing is really just getting the roles and responsibilities right. And I think that's what we've done at Mattel, is we separated demand and supply. And we said, okay, we want demand to be focused on demand. How much can you sell, right? And we want supply to be really focused on how do you best service that need? And then that balancing really becomes, that's the conversation. It's not, hey, I need this in my DC. Well, okay, you're probably not the best person as a stakeholder from commercial to tell me about safety stock. So just tell me what you need. Well, I need to account for, you know, the variance on this sale, because I'm not sure if it's going to work or not. So, okay, then I can adjust that in my inventory policy. So for us at Mattel, it was really separating the demand conversation and getting really good at forecasting and that input signal, and separating that from the supply response. Because oftentimes I think, you know, companies, and I've seen it in the past, that you put those two things together and it just really becomes hard to measure, and you can't have a quality discussion on either side because everybody's confused.
Appreciate that. Okay, we're going to go over here. You've been very patient.
Great discussion, by the way. Sri Mangalampalli from Tada. My question is again for AZ. Sorry about that. So Mattel as a business has some nuances or differences compared to the rest of the industry. So let me kind of highlight that. It's toys. So the customers are usually kids that can be very fickle, right? As in their needs and choices change every year. A good example is Barbie, what Barbie has done for Mattel over the last 1 year. So my question is specifically on forecasting, and how do you handle the complexity of understanding the needs? Now, some things like Uno or Hot Wheels are probably your bread and butter, but a situation like Barbie that came up and your lead times are long, right? Most of them are from overseas. How do you manage the forecasting aspect of this? Do you have any algorithms, models that you have? Could you maybe shed some light? And if this 1 minute may not answer, I can go offline and have that conversation with you as well. Thank you.
Definitely.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think you started to do it, right? You started to segment the portfolio just in the question, right? So what are our bread and butter and those types of things? And do we have algorithms? Yeah, we do. And we've got some proprietary ones that we've been working on that are really, that are good for us. But you've got to understand what's right for your business, right? Highly seasonal business, high turnover, lots of new SKUs, lots of it's based on entertainment properties, not only just, you know, things like the Barbie movie, but, you know, other movies where we have partnerships with movie studios that, you know, have releases, those types of things. So lots of new product introduction, which of course is less predictable. But again, it's not about getting it right that one time. It's about how do you bake that intelligence into your forecast over time. And a lot of that is the algorithm, but a lot of it's the process, right? Because it's about consensus. Because your baseline might say, hey, the result of this is going to be, you know, X, and your marketer really wants to push it, or your commercial partner really wants to push it, and they say, hey, we're going to do Y. Well, in a consensus process, the P&L owner makes that decision. You can record it, go back later, and bake that intelligence in over time. So the math is super important. And I'm not gonna say that it's not, because I do believe that, but more critical than getting the math right today is the process that bakes in the intelligence of how you think about the business and how your commercial partners think about the business over time. And if you do that, then you'll get better as a business. over time, regardless of the unpredictability or the surface unpredictability of your market, high turnover, those types of things. You can do it, like you can do the math behind any of it, but it's really that alignment and that process, the strength of that process that helps your business succeed. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Aaron. So most of us are going to be kicking it later after this thing. So I'm so sorry, we don't have any time for more questions, but the reason why I mentioned we're going to be kicking it out there is because you can come up and chat if you want to connect on anything. I just want to say thank you so much for hearing about this and listening and engaging, asking questions. We really appreciate it. And again, to Nick and Marvi for setting this up and allowing us to come and talk about this from the commercial side of the business. And, everybody on this panel, met maybe like six times. So there's a lot of effort put in to try and drive some good content for you all here. And so I just want to say thank you, to everybody here and thanks to everybody on the panel and engaging conversation. And one thing I wanted to plug here is for the first time, the Institute is partnering to offer a S&OP certification. So if you're all familiar with the Lean Six Sigma Green Belt certification, the school is going to be offering a S&OP certification. So if any of you all are interested in that opportunity, it'll be kind of a deeper dive as to what we're talking about here. I have the opportunity of helping lead that, so that's pretty sweet, and I'm really grateful for that. So I would just encourage anybody, who's interested in the topic or might know a lot about it, come add value. If you don't know a lot about it and you're interested in getting a certification, please come hang. So thank you all. Thank you all.
Thank you, Al.
Great job.
Yeah.
Great job.
You. Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Alex and team. Seeing Aaron up here with Mattel, those of you that were around 10 years ago, my wife expressed an interest in getting a Tesla. They had just come out, and I thought, well, I'm going to go down to Mattel and get a Tesla Hot Wheel and save $85,000.